folks, we're here with another episode of Is This a Pickleball Podcast? And I'm your host, Matthew, with Matthew K. Pickleball. And this, as you can see, is not my co-host, Wilson. I gave him the day off. We've exchanged him for a much better looking man. This is my new friend, Mr. I rib Wilson all the time. So he's literally one of 3 listeners. So when he hears that, folks know Wilson and I just had a little texting convo. He's good with the trash talk on the court. I'm hoping he's good with the trash talk when he doesn't make the podcast. But anyway, this is not Wilson. This is Larry, the owner of KiwiLabs, one of my favorite pickleball paddle companies. And
too kind.
What'd you say, Larry?
I said you're too kind. Stop.
Oh, no. No one has ever accused me of being too kind. But for folks that don't know KiwiLabs, they're a Michigan-based paddle company. And as I think I just said, they make great paddles, including one of my favorites, the Slice. This is the OG Slice with the beefy handle. This was one of the first paddles I ever reviewed. I love this paddle. If you like a long handle, if you like the two-handers, you cannot beat this one. More of these need to be out in the wild. And then one of my recent loves of KiwiLabs is the Circuit in 14 millimeter. This is one of my favorite takes on Gen 3 tech, and I have reviews of both of these on the channel, so be sure to check that out. And we're going to talk about those. Don't worry, Larry, I know you just told me you actually have real children, but I'm sure you treat these a little bit like your children.
In its own special way, of course.
Special way. But yeah, so, and then one other bit of housekeeping, folks. At the end of the video, we will be doing a giveaway. Larry is helping me out with a giveaway. This will be the first one on the podcast, so stay tuned until the end of the podcast, and there's something special, so just don't click away. But before we get too deep into things, Larry, how's your week going? What have you been up to? Give me a little bit. What's up?
I think the biggest change that's happening this week is in Michigan, we're doing a transition from indoor play to outdoor play. So with that comes, one, canceling my indoor membership or pausing it or whatever, and then going outside. And I don't know if it's super obvious, but I got hella sunburn on my nose the very first day playing on Monday outside. And I was just like, oh, of course this would happen. Welcome to Michigan. But, we're dealing with it. It's a day-by-day thing.
All right. Well, all right, folks. Down in the comments, let Larry know what sort of sunblock he should get.
Sure. Or any at all.
Or any at all. Out here in California, SoCal, sunblock is a must. When I do a morning session, I do whatever my routine is, and then I use the Trader Joe's facial sunblock, and then I got spray for the neck, because that's what roasts for me. But all right, well, I've seen it seems like every other pickleball gear reviewer is based in Michigan. I've seen all their stories about doing this transition, this great migration. I had no idea that was a thing, but it makes total sense. I am jealous. It sounds like you all have great outdoor venues and indoor venues. And in Los Angeles, we are thirsty for both, to be honest. But
hard to find do you play more indoor or outdoor? You got to be more outdoor, right?
Yeah, there in Los Angeles in particular, there's really not an indoor scene. There's I'm actually in Los Angeles. A lot of people in the Discords, they lump in Orange County and even the outskirts of Los Angeles. But for folks that are familiar with the area, I live in Echo Park, so right by the Dodger Stadium. And the Dodger Stadium is right by downtown LA. And yeah, our pickleball areas are, you got to do a drive. You got to do a trek to get some games in. Well, Larry, this would be the whole podcast, me talking about right now, since our pickleball, in the actual LA is so scattered. It's sort of like surfing. I've used this analogy before, like where you're hunting for waves. You're sort of hunting for the good open play out here. So you're like, the fires out here changed everything, to be honest. It was like a snow globe. Like everything got shaken up, and it's finally settling, and I'm trying to get it figured out. But my particular sort of, because guys, we're going to talk about this on the podcast, on this episode of this podcast, but Larry, he has a YouTube channel where he sort of vlogs and gives a little background of what it's like in his life as a paddle company owner. But one thing that I've seen in his vlogs, he has a routine, folks. He's got the morning play indoors with an older crowd where he gets dinking done, he gets his drops in, and then he's got his evening crowd where he's doing counters to the bangers. And I sort of had a similar thing going myself before the fires. I had a place where I would go test out the drops, the dinks with an older crowd, and then I would sort of arrange some time to get some good play footage. But it's all a mess right now. A question that really is hard for me to answer, which is why I rambled. But I'm going to get it figured out. But Larry, this isn't about me. I know it's called the Matthew K. Pickleball channel.
A little about you.
It's a little about me, but I want this to be about you today. And so what I just wanted to hear from you, just to kick things off, because there are some big topics. Everyone, don't worry. Tariffs, we're going to talk about it, but I've been wanting to have Larry on this podcast for a long time. I mean, we are episode 8. How he wasn't on episode 2, I don't know. Folks. But he's here now, and so I sort of already let the cat out of the bag a bit, but what is a day in the life of a small paddle company owner? Because you're not the Yola, you're not the Selkirk, you don't have... I imagine those folks, they're driving their Audis, get into their campus, and they have 20 people meetings all the time. But for KiwiLabs, you're a smaller company doing great paddles. But walk us through a typical day, if you don't mind.
It's changed a lot recently now that I have a shop where I've been working out of. So let me go back to what it used to be, because I think that's far more interesting. So when we first started, up until the first 2 years, was literally a couple Sam's Club shelves that I just would have to keep buying more and more as our paddle inventory grew. And that started in the basement, expanded to the garage, and then now we have an actual shop to put everything. But it's just wake up, print out the orders, ship them, and then go do my other job. So I've always done KiwiLabs in tandem with a big boy job, or whatever you want to call it, until I got the shop now. So I'm doing... I own 2 businesses, so it's also managing those. So I own an electric bike store chain. We now have 3 here in Michigan, and then, of course, KiwiLabs on top of that. So it's really just, whatever's on fire in this business, put that out in the morning, and then work on the other business at night. And the other business is usually Kiwi, where I actually, it's smooth sailing there, because pickleball is just my fun detox time. So it's always, meditative to just stare at paddles and learn about that kind of stuff. So that's the fun work.
Oh yeah, I bet you've been getting a lot of Zen lately the last couple of weeks. But we're gonna talk about...
That's my PR answer.
we're gonna talk about...
There's chaos happening, of course, but the real life, day to day, my dream version of it is what I just said.
When things are going good, things are going good. So
exactly.
you're working to make it that way. The world might not be helping right now, but we're definitely going to talk about all these hurdles. But yeah, I actually sort of knew you had this other business, and I'm glad you touched on that. So you have a business background. You have, in the sense of I'm not saying you're a giant mogul in finance, but you have a perspective on how to run a business.
Sure.
One that a brick and mortar store, if I'm not mistaken, that's what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the real deal, small American business, you're doing it. But
yeah.
And electric bikes, very interesting space. But how did you get into pickleball? That's always the first question I ask anyone at Open Play. If I get them on the podcast, what's your story? How'd you find this thing that we're all drawn towards? And then also, I'm going to press you right here, right? The hard questions are coming. I told you, I said there weren't going to be any gotcha questions. I lied. Here's the gotcha. How in the world did you get into the paddle business?
Sure.
So how'd you get into pickleball, and what sort of insanity juice were you drinking to dive into this world? So tell us a bit. Give us the story.
Well, they literally, obviously, go hand in hand, right? So I got into pickleball because my parents, they're like, we did this thing pickleball last weekend, and we've been going every week now. And then we're home for, I think, Easter or something, and go play with all their friends. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then turns out my cousins have been into it for a year now, and they're playing like they're into it. And that spiraled into, okay, well, now I'm into it. And that spiraled into that I think most unified feeling that we all get. It's like, okay, this is fun, but what's that next paddle? Because I see everyone else on these courts, and they don't have this Nui Pipo that I have. No shade or anything, but and then so I had that moment, and it was like, got to learn what the paddles are. Why are these good? Why are these bad? And I got so stuck there that it led into, I think we could make these too. Like there's nothing crazy that are going into these. Like, okay, so instead of buying my next paddle, I'm just going to literally make it. And that spiraled into, learning everything there is to know. Luckily, my job prior to that job, the job I was working then, was for a software company called ArcSight. Give them a quick shout out. They're an iPad application, and I did the marketing there. Long story short, I got good. I'm still very average, but it's a CAD software, so I got decent at doing that. So all the materials and stuff that the factories would need on my end, I was like, well, I can handle all that stuff because I know how this app works, and those trifecta of things, snowballed into a pickleball paddle company.
All right, folks, real quick, if you don't know what CAD is, it's an engineering program. It's a 3D design application that usually you have to have pretty some substantial knowledge and experience. But Larry, I know this already, actually was familiar as a result of a previous job, knew sort of like a prosumer version or a user-friendly version.
I don't want to make me sound smart, because you just made it sound like CAD, like only and the advanced CAD, you do need to be really, really smart. This is like iPad friendly. Like if I could figure it out, you can. So another shout out. I'm still doing marketing for that.
Yeah, still marketing. But I actually did folks. I know I'm a mysterious man to everyone out there, but I have a twin brother who is an aerospace engineer. And I actually sent him, after you shared that on your YouTube channel, I sent that to him, and he thought it looked very, very cool. And so Larry had some knowledge that is pretty accessible to everyone else if they buy into I hope you got some stock options with them, because our audience of 200, they're going to go download this app right away.
All right. But look out, Apple App Store.
App Store. But yeah, so Larry had a tool which anyone could have, but more than anything, he was crazy. And instead of going down the rabbit hole of becoming a paddle reviewer like some of us who got obsessed with like, ooh, I have the new Pippo, but that person has this paddle, what's up? I understand the urge to research and dig into the weeds and find the best value and whatnot. I don't think I would, even if I knew about that iPad app, I don't think I would have ever jumped to the point of like talking to factories. I don't think I would have jumped to the point of like designing a paddle. Instead, I've just spent years making YouTube videos. And so, yeah, I definitely, I understand where you started, and
it's definitely like the two paths. Because if I didn't end up there, I think, because I also have a YouTube channel, obviously, because that's how you probably saw the thing you're talking about. But like, Yeah, I would have been right there with you. I just went on this path. Like, I
Yeah,
totally get it. It seems like our brains are a little in sync at that little crossroad, that dissection of, okay,
yeah.
what's that upgrade?
We both have the illness, but you're but you're
It is,
coping in
it's a
it.
little crazy, right?
Yeah, you're
In a good
coping
way.
in a different way, making a business. But I am curious because you I did want to ask like how you go about like creating a paddle, designing a paddle, and I know you have a little bit of a cheat code with this app that you're familiar with, but you are like you like yeah you have a vision for a paddle, but nothing you've sort of told me that I know about your story has put you in a position of understanding on how to deal with factories.
Mm.
And I don't know, maybe you could give us sort of like a bird's eye view because it's going to become relevant to our conversation later. But like someone's out there, they got the paddle, they want a new paddle and they want to make it themselves. And how maybe they want to make it a business, maybe not, but what are the steps after that? Like, I want to be a paddle designer, I want to be a paddle maker. Walk us through what you did. I think that could be a general sort of workflow, but folks, don't take if you're taking notes, put a little asterisk because this workflow that Larry's about to walk us through has some hiccups coming up that we're going to talk about. But
Okay.
when you started, how did one go about designing a paddle and then getting it produced?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot there. I think what I'm mostly picking up on is um, who's that initial startup phase, and let's say you have the idea and you're ready to go to the next level. For me, what I did was I paid to play essentially. So, because like you said, I did not know how to work with overseas manufacturers. Like that was my first taste of it. I've never done that before. And so instead of flying to China and figuring out how all that, actually interviewing factories and coming to them, here's the materials I need. I did the way more expensive version. It literally would have been cheaper just to fly there and interview a couple of factories. I ordered just tons of samples from, I think it's probably 8 to 14 different factories that I interviewed, as we'll say, and told them the specs I need, the materials I need, and I just had them make me, a random paddle of whatever shape. And then the ones who could do it well, I like kind of did the next phase. Okay, so what molds do you have? Give me the files, and then like I can kind of tweak them, come up with whatever one I want, and then I go to them this time and I say, all right, make these with my actual graphics on it in the way I want it, and that's like that next round who can do it in the ways that we need to be able to customize. And I'm making it sound easier for a reason of like you should probably follow the same step, because at this point you can find who's going to be able to work with you as far as like needing fine-tuned stuff, because that is so much. You think it's like obviously it's a no-brainer, they're going to do what I say, but it is so not a no-brainer. Like there's the language barrier. Obviously we're talking about working with China, so not everyone's perfect, and in fact it's like challenging. Like there's a lot of, I've spent so much money just on like miscommunications. It's like not even funny. I'm just like, I'll never see it again. You've probably seen my video of, that was t-shirts, not paddles. But am I totally trailing
Folks,
off?
if
Yeah.
no, Larry, you're
No.
doing great. You're doing great. Trust me. I really thought about calling this channel actually when I first started the Pickleball Rambler because I personally just ramble as well. And it would have actually
Guilty.
it would have made my life easier if I had chosen that, but that's a different story. But no, I hear what you're saying. Basically, folks, what I want to point out here, Larry has sort of outlined, it's potentially easy. I don't think it's easy to be brave enough to like scour the internet and figure out how to contact a factory, not to mention a half dozen, however many Larry reached out to. And then I also think it takes some braveness to put some cash out there,
You
get
have to
these
be willing to
samples.
just say bye. Like that was the part that um, was the hardest at first because I was like, oh my God. But in the back of your head, you can always justify it. You're like, well, if I do this enough, it could work. So,
Right.
uh,
And
they,
folks, if you look at his channel, his YouTube channel, what's your YouTube handle, Larry? For
it's just
Kiwi.
Kiwi Pickleball TV.
Kiwi Pickleball TV.
Yep.
I think there might be an underscore in there somewhere, folks,
Oh,
but
probably, yeah. But we have decent SEO. We'll pop up if you write Kiwi Pickleball.
you'll find them. But
Yeah.
he sort of walks through the step that he sort of didn't mention, which we've covered, is so he requests a bunch of samples. So basically, there are factories that produce paddles. They've got catalogs of different options. He is requesting sort of generics, and then because he has this idea, basically he tests these things out and play tests them, and this is what you see on the channel. He tries things out, and this is the thing that I think separates smaller pickleball paddle companies from the bigger companies, is they have to be precious, and it's because they can't produce 8 versions of a paddle and offer them and have that shipped or whatever. So there's a human being, a human element that is trying the paddle and getting a feel for themselves. And so if you can line up with one of these companies and the person behind them, in this case Larry, if their play style sort of suits you, you found the sweet spot for a whole adventure of different kinds of paddles. And so he tries them out, and then basically we'll tweak different things and then find a factory that actually does what they say they will do per his instructions, which sounds to be like a bit of a pain to actually. Yeah. But
the only small adjustment I have to that is everything you said is spot on, by the way. It's just that now that I have the factories, that's more of the routine of being able to just throw spaghetti at the wall at a couple of prototypes. But that first time around, it was literally just who can do what I say. So it's easier the first time around. It's not as scary as you just made it sound. But now that I have the people who will actually do it, then we have a shorthand at this point where we can get those prototypes done fast. I can get 4 or 5 at a time, like you said, with just slight variations, and then play test it, and the winner makes it to the next round. But now I do it with paddles instead of factories, and hopefully. Oh, go ahead.
No. What's the hope? I love hope. That we need more of it.
I was just going to say, hopefully we're actually close on our next one here too, doing that same exact methodology. So fingers crossed.
Yes, I'm rooting for it. And then I think before we talk about the future, I think we sort of outlined. Larry's saying it's easy. I think you have to be crazy to start and then keep a paddle company going. But I did want to talk about just what he's produced, what KiwiLabs has produced. From someone, I don't have stock in this company. I just am a huge fan. And so, and to be clear, when I first started YouTubing, Larry and a couple other companies, there were only a few people that I was very small channel, even smaller, if you can believe, than I am now. And Larry was one of the few. I will also shout out to David at 11624. They're probably the only companies that really took a risk and would send me review units to try out. And so, Larry, really appreciate you helping me get a start in the YouTubing space. But the first paddle of Kiwi that I ever got to try was the Slice. And I talked about this at the top of the video. This is a Gen 2 thermoform paddle, and it is a very unusual shape. To this day, it has a super extended handle. And one thing that does separate KiwiLabs apart from, in my opinion, from all the rest, is beyond the design of the actual paddle as an object, as a tool, or as a functional thing. The graphic design I love. This is not something a lot of the smaller companies in particular get right. I'm not sure if you work with a designer, but whatever you do, keep doing it. It always has something that pops, but it's not overwhelming. And this tape is my own edge tape. But
I was gonna say, you do make it look pretty. That's pretty crispy with the green edge guard there.
This is hockey tape. This was my first sort of like
Nice.
hack. Yeah, when I was starting out. But the slice is a paddle that is near and dear to me. And I don't know. Do you want to talk? I'm gonna walk through all my thoughts on your paddles while you're
Okay.
listening to me. But I had some questions as we go, if that's all right. Which is this?
Yeah.
I still think is a very unique shape. And I haven't seen to this day a lot of paddles this shape. Do you want to talk about paddle molds? So right now you're talking to factories, you're getting involved in the design, but if you're not familiar with how this object, a paddle, is manufactured, basically a factory has to take pieces, puts them in a mold, and I'm simplifying this, and presses it, and voila, you have a paddle. But that mold is what determines the shape of this object. So do you want to talk a little bit about molds? Because I know that
Sure.
is what separates sort of companies. The fact that you individualize your paddles is a differentiating factor from a company that's a straight catalog paddle. And I want to make sure to differentiate KiwiLabs because your line is not straight up just like ordering something off a shelf. We've already talked about how you test, tweak, and then make sure you do quality control and make sure the product you're getting from the factory is what you intended. So do you want to talk maybe about the slices mold in particular? Would that
Yeah, I
be
think that's the
all
best
right?
one to talk about because that was the first one. And I usually follow this recipe, right? So they most of the factories, like you said, literally have a catalog, right? So it's a bunch of molds that the engineers at their facility has been working on, and or that are most common that they're allowed to use there. And what I usually will do is get the file, or sorry, with the slice in particular, I got a file of one that I thought was close to what I wanted. And really, the slice changes is I barely did much to that one, to be just completely honest, other than raising the handle. We wanted the handle a little longer. And other than that, everyone was going elongated. That was like when we came out with that, nobody cared about standard shapes at all. So I wanted a standard shape to start with, but nobody like everyone wanted a long handle and the
Yeah.
17.5 it. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a compromise. I'm gonna do a hybrid so I could still get that, hopefully big sweet spot I was getting with a standard 8 inch, but to appease like what everyone kind of wants right now, which is the long handle elongated. So it was the best of both worlds, in my opinion, and I think it obviously, it still holds up. Like, I, not to overpromise here, but our next release will probably use the exact same shape just with new guts because I just keep going back to it. It's so rock solid. But yeah, that's how that one came to be. And then we're like, okay, it works. Now there is a couple strategies to that. If you are talking just from the big business side, is trying it cold pressed first. That's something I've done in the past because that just needs a laser cutter, and you don't need to actually pay to have a thermoformed mold built. Is that all basic
No, no,
enough,
no.
or do you want me to explain
Yeah,
that a
that's
little
great.
more? Okay.
So this one was a thermoform paddle.
Right.
This was, I think it came out a little over 2 years ago. Who knows what time
It
is, but
probably is pushing 2 years,
yeah,
if
and
not
so
more.
that was when Gen 2 paddles sort of were in their infancy, coming out of their
Oh, yeah.
infancy, and that's what everyone wanted. And thermoformed and loosely defined is basically it does require that mold we were talking about. It
Yeah.
heats the
You need
paddle
a
up.
big metal. It's just a big chunk of metal that you fill in the materials in, like Matt was saying.
Yeah, so if you made creepy crawlers as a kid,
Just like that. Yeah. That's
just like
actually our
that.
next shape, spiders.
Good. I want the scorpion one,
Yeah.
but yeah. So thermoform paddles, and this is going to become relevant later on in our conversation, but requires a factory that the reason thermoform paddles really got people excited was compared to cold press paddles, which Larry's talking about, which only require a laser cutter. They don't need to be pressed or heated up, although it is a good way to explore shapes. thermoform paddles require a certain expertise, a certain kind of factory, and basically when you cook a paddle hot, typically it resulted in a paddle that allowed the person swinging the paddle to get more power out of their hits.
Sure.
That's a good rule of thumb, and it is
It
a
also
constant...
traditionally, just to add to that, will have the foam edges, which was
Yes.
the kickoff of that. Did you already mention that? I'm sorry if you did.
We haven't mentioned that, but the other
Okay.
big thing that happened when people started hot pressing paddles, they started injecting stuff along the edges, and that enabled folks to get a bigger sweet spot. So we had more power from the thermoforming, the more it being a bit more of a solid object, and then that edge foam gave us sweeter, bigger sweet spots, so we felt like better pickleball players. And so Gen 2 really took off. So Larry, you did tweak the mold though, because getting that longer handle, I think that is like what makes this paddle so special, because it's long but with massive sweet spot. So it's a whip machine for people that are into whips. Yeah, and it's still very unique. There are not a lot of shapes. I'm actually working on a wide body video like right now, and you still don't get this particular combo. So if you tweak a mold, do you own that mold? Is that like your IP?
It can be. You can sign. There's usually paperwork that comes when you do a mold, and you can sign to make sure no one uses it. That said, it just doesn't happen that way always. There's
so if I've always been wondering if you get a custom mold, that gets thrown into the catalog, right? Is that how that works? And then you'd have to use litigation to stop an American company that's utilizing.
Yeah, overseas is like, it's almost like because there's basically what will happen is, and this is what they would argue, right? So Factory One's working with Selkirk right now. Selkirk comes up with this new technology or new shape. They're building it here. They're talking to this factory, and then this guy has a customer who said, hey, Selkirk's doing this. Can you guys do that? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden, this factory is doing the same thing that this one is. So it doesn't matter what this factory had signed over here. This one is doing it now. This one's doing it now. This one's doing it now. And then it's all out the window. So, and then shapes too. I think we hit an apex of like the shapes. I've tried a lot of shapes, but I keep going back to the core, proven ones, right? So
yeah.
And it's mostly just that standard elongated, right? It's just everyone can agree that I think we kind of peaked at that. Not to say that you can't innovate still, but that's what it is. Yeah.
So folks, the one thing I want you to hold on to, if you're taking notes, because I know we got note takers for the pod.
Definitely, yeah.
Just note, there are these layers when you're working with overseas factories. We've already talked about like the communication barrier, but also, and I'm going to add a little bit more to what Larry just said, the factories, or sometimes you might be talking to a factory and it's really a broker, is my understanding. The communication sort of mishmash, there's stuff happening that the paddle company owners aren't in control of. There are folks talking to each other overseas. There's just stuff going on. That's going to become part of the convo, because let's move on. After that release, you had a very unique paddle. Once again, just beautiful aesthetics. This is the Spiked. And this was a paddle that... this was an edgeless paddle with the throat hole, the arrow holes, the holes on the side, like cutting through the air. At the time that you released this, Larry, this was very unique. I remember seeing this photo. You had dropped a prototype photo maybe in your newsletter. I can't remember, but I was like, I want to review that paddle. And fortunately I had the chance to get going back to your iteration process. You had a batch, I think, with the wrong size handle, so you were able to get
Oh
some
yeah.
review units out to
Oh
the
yeah. So
baby.
I was doing the same mistakes back then too.
The
Perfect.
baby reviewers, Matthew K. Pickleball, was able to get his hands on a new release. My channel is known to never review a paddle upon release. We're always a month late. But I think I got this one out close. And this is just a super unique paddle. It was for, especially at the time, super unique. It's really for people probably that had tennis backgrounds, for folks that could produce their own power, and for folks that knew how to customize paddle. And this was a paddle that really pushed me to learn about paddle customization to get the kind of performance I wanted, because it was a departure from this bad boy here that was super, super user friendly. This one, anyone could pick this up and just feel like a pro. This one took some know-how, took some knowledge, but very interesting paddle, fun to play with. But the question I had, going back to that mold, let's talk about you worked on this, you got what you wanted, and then soon after I saw the copycats coming. So is that frustrating for you to then see? I know that there's a design out there in the ether, but that had some of these aspects. But as far as like releasing a paddle, the spiked came out, and I was pretty plugged into the paddles. This was like the first time I really noticed this design. I don't know, like, what did it feel like? Like, did you? I don't want to turn the screws too hard on you, but like, did you see copycats coming out after?
Yeah, I mean, well, so again, it's the same process we did, right? So I knew it was in the ether. I already knew they were all coming. We just, we tweaked it. We had the CAD file, extended it a little bit. The other ones that are on there are, I think, a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. So it's a little bit of like, I don't want to say, I don't know. It's just, it means nothing to me when they're all like out there. It's not like a bad thing, you know.
Okay, all right, folks. Larry is a much more balanced human than me. He
Like
did not.
it was like everyone could see them coming. You know,
Yeah,
they're floating
I
around at all the factories. Everyone's kind of pitching crazy holes everywhere, and you
yeah.
know,
Whenever I think I mean, I'll do a thumbnail style that I get a template from a website to help me with a thumbnail, and then I'll see someone else use my thumbnail. I'm like, man, they took my idea, knowing that like I am not the original creator. So you're way more humble than I am. But did you learn anything from the spiked in particular? Because that was a bit of a departure, I would say, from the slice. Like, is that a paddle that you took any specific lessons from? Because when we walk through the rest of the line, there's no edgeless, there's no
yeah.
no wind fins, no throat holes. Was there a lesson that you learned from that? Was that a successful release, if you don't mind sharing? Like, what did you learn from
So
that?
the reason it exists was just to fill a gap in our lineup, mostly, right? So everything is like, I don't know, so vanilla or like cookie cutter in the pickleball paddle world too. We just needed, in my opinion, something that no one else has seen. Like that's the purple color, the colored handle. Like we just needed something that stood out a little bit, and had all the features that none of the other paddles had in our lineup. So edgeless, something, with a versatile shape, and I packed it all into one and got to sample it in, and I was like, this is too good not to release. And so I immediately just added it to the lineup. So
Awesome.
I still, like, as far as like playing at the line or like fast hand stuff, it's one of the most fun paddles we make. That and like my serves with it just dip. I've got the most topspin out of like any other paddle than on a fresh spike. One thing I do not like about it is that we have to do the spray grit on it. And all the companies are saying that they have a better version. They're, from what I can see, they're all just the same, and they all just don't. Everything after being hit is gonna like go away eventually, and that's the only problem I have with that paddle is that just knowing that the more you play with it, the spray grit goes away, and I couldn't find a better solution when it came to spray grit. So that's another reason why we pivoted back to just doing peel ply on all our other ones, just the standard epoxy. So that's definitely a lesson I learned of that.
Yeah,
if you call it that.
I'm sort of bummed that you're talking about your serves have a lot of dip. I'm sort of bummed that the throat hole, I think Pickleball Studios' review of the Vatic with the throat hole really pushed consumers to be afraid of that kind of tech. But I personally think what we're seeing now, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later on, but what people are loving, and I know you got kids in bed, so I'm going to move a little faster, but it's think... All right, good.
They're in bed. It's cool.
Yeah, I also know no one's going to listen to the 2-hour pod on my channel, I got it. But I think the throat hole, everyone right now loves the foam paddles and these Gen 4, Gen 3 paddles because of the extended dwell. I think this thing here was allowed extended dwell with backswing.
Sure.
And I wish this hadn't. I feel there is more experimentation to have been done with this space. I think so. Maybe it's something that will get revisited. But as you just hinted at, like tech goes in waves in the pickleball paddle, and so it's like
my
trying to
keep 2 cents
up.
On that, just real quick, because I think you're right on. Like the tech is great. I think at that point when we released that was like right when companies boomed like crazy. So I don't like. Does that line up for you? Like it's how I'm remembering it anyway. It's like
I think
that. So did like 30 other companies come out with like 30 other paddles at the same time. And I'll get back to you in just 1 second about the throat hole. Is that I immediately also saw like 100 others from every company, and I think everyone immediately was just like, "Oh, it's got the Selkirk hole. It's got the Selkirk hole. It's got the Selkirk hole." And when I saw that stuff, I'm like, you know what, that is Selkirk. That's their thing, right? So let's immediately, everyone was like, I want my own thing now. So I think that's what everyone is searching to do. Like,
right,
what's
to
ours?
have a standout feature.
That's what
get
happened
that.
At that point. Everyone immediately is like, all right, let's go in the lab. Our thing's going to be this,
and going with that boom. This obviously was a more costly paddle to produce than the slice. And so it was a tough price point then, in particular, because that boom, the other competition is what you're talking about. You can compete on features, quality, or price, and it's hard to bring the novel, the experimental features, and then compete at price, especially for these companies like that are your size are fighting for market share and trying to build a following. And so that was what I remember when this paddle came out. Like the value proposition, you still had the slice next to it. And so that there was a lot, like folks hadn't had a chance to try this kind of tech outside of maybe the Selkirks. And so I think it was a very crowded market for new paddles and new companies, but it's also you had such a great paddle right next to it with a different value proposition. And so,
that's definitely a lesson. I found that too.
Well, it's I think a lesson you're having to learn again in this new world.
Oh, for sure. I will say there is people who still like we'll never take that out of our lineup though, just because. One of my favorite stories is there's like this little community, I think in Virginia, and one person bought a spike there, and now there's like 14 or some who all have the spike, and they not only play with it, they like continue to like get more for everyone in the community and grow and grow and grow. And it's so cool. And they're the only people to do this. This is why it sticks out in my head so much. They literally sent me a postcard in the mail of like how much and they're all holding it. There's like 14 of them, and I was like, oh, this is I can never not have this in the lineup. So
I can't wait to roll up on that Virginia Open play. That would be very, very fun to see so many spikes, but still a very, very unique paddle. Once again, what's now just spoiler alert, like on this line overview is going back to there was a human being, in this case Larry, playing with paddles and seeing how they felt what they did. And all of the paddles, I've sort of have used this analogy before, like as a paddle reviewer, you're sort of spoiled. You basically have a bag of paddles and look at the bag as like a Swiss Army knife, and you pull out a paddle for a certain kind of game, a certain kind of opponent. And what's cool about KiwiLabs arsenal is each one is a weapon suited for a different style of play or player or scenario. And so there's a lot of diversity. It's not incremental changes within the line. Each paddle, I would say, has a dramatic difference, which I imagine just from the way you explained how you go about getting your paddles done, like a lot of playtesting, a lot of trying out different things, you want a substantial difference, because if you're just doing iterative, like I would imagine that would get boring.
I think you nailed it, by the way, just before you go on. That's exactly what my goal is to have a paddle for every type of player. And as I've progressed in my skill level too, I go into these different holes of like what I like to play with too, and I kind of follow that. So I'm always a little biased of like, okay, I'm in my control era. Like I'm only playing with paddles where I can like perfectly, drop and dink with, that's, that was slice era or whatever. And then, I'm trying to hit it hard. That was the spiked era, and I was having fun just like sending it as hard as I can. And then, more advanced play led to the circuit. And, so I think we're all just waiting for me to get better so we can have our next best paddle, it seems like.
Well, on that note, I did want to talk real briefly about the Canon. Once again, very sleek design. This came in 14 and 16 millimeter. This one, folks, I have not gotten my review out yet. I'm very behind.
Oh, no.
But yeah. But this was your power era. Do you want to tell us a little bit, like 14, 16, folks, if you can't see this minimal design, this is black on black, just very sleek. KiwiLabs killing it with the design. But yeah, I think I got one. You sent me I think a unit you had been working on, and
nice.
I was not in my power era when this one came to me.
Do you have a 16 or 14 or both?
Right in my hand, I have the thinner one. I think I have the other one. This is 14, right? The thin's 14. Yeah. Which one do you prefer?
I am with thermoform paddles lately. I'm all about thinner ones.
Okay.
I don't know. I'd actually like to pick your brain real quick. I think the 16 mils of all of the thermoform paddles lately just seem harder to control for me. Is that like crazy? Like like forever, it's always been 16's more control, it's more plush, and I don't know. I have so much more aim and like spin and dwell time and precise shots with a thermoform 14 for some. I just think it sticks longer. I think you get a little more whip at the end. I could be going crazy though too.
You're not going crazy. I'll be careful with my adjectives. But I am in a. I think Gen 3 in particular. So Gen 3, folks, is Gen 2 paddles typically, but with additional foam enhancements, and we're going to talk about that. But I think that generation has really revealed to me the rule of thumb with 14, 16 millimeter. Those rules are not straightforward. I think
They're
outside
not. They really are.
cold press
I think
paddles.
like the slightest material, it changes from what I've seen.
Yeah,
so.
And so I don't think you're crazy, Larry.
Look at me justifying it extra hard. No, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't think you're crazy. I think 14 millimeter Gen 2 paddles, I'm okay making a blanket statement right now. Folks, let me know down in the comments if you disagree with what I'm about to say. But I think
They will.
I don't. Well, of my two listeners, they're pretty nice to me. There's one guy that always corrects my pronunciation, but I don't know if he listens to the pod. He just dives into the videos. But I think thinner paddles, and I actually have a take on 14 millimeter, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I think thinner Gen 2 paddles, so those are the paddles that are cooked hot, which tend to give more power than the fully cold press paddles. I think they tend to sometimes, some of them can feel more controllable than their thicker counterparts. And I'm talking about one-to-one paddles. So you're comparing a cannon to a cannon, for example, although this isn't specific to the cannons. But you can only compare the same paddles, just in different thicknesses. I think some of the thinner ones can be easier to control depending how they're constructed because they have less dwell. And the ones that are thicker that have more dwell then are producing more power on the output. And so let's not get too into the weeds onto this, but yeah, I agree. Like the rule of thumb, like 16, like thinner, are harder to control. I don't think it is a blanket statement that can be used anymore. And I really think there's so many different nuances with paddle construction now. Like thicknesses is just one of many things. And so yeah, I don't think there's any rule of thumb at this point. But yeah, you had your banging phase. You brought us the cannon. And then what I really want to talk about, because there are lots and lots of power paddles, right? But one thing that, going back to like you were trying to bring something new, something different to the market, and actually, my paddles, folks, they're stacked wrong. But you then saw, I think, a real space in the marketplace that needed to be filled. And that is the paddle that you upgrade to after you get your crummy Amazon paddle and you've decided you're going to spend more than a weekend in pickleball. What do you buy? What do you get? And you filled that space with a beginner paddle called the 00 Start. This paddle is Gen 1.5. So folks, that what we were talking about earlier, so it's not heated up, but it's got that edge foam, so you've got that expanded sweet spot. And then you chose...
just in that particular paddle, the foam's only in the handle in that one.
Okay.
But Gen 1.5 means extra foam in it. You're right on. Just in that particular one, it's just the handle.
No, Larry, I was wrong. So for the 00 Start, so Gen 1.5 typically means there's some sort of foam enhancement. And oftentimes it's in the perimeter, but for the 00 Start, it's in the handle. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay, but the differentiator is this is also 14 millimeter, honeycomb core, and then you actually went through two, I know of, releases with different surface treatments. Is that accurate?
Or so the peel ply we did changed. So we switched over from like the standard to a fabric. So moving to a fabric allowed less or more consistent dimples in the epoxy. So the fabric sheet, when you take it off versus what they had, it involved like a lot less hand sanding over the paddles. And that's what that was. So just like the first initial run didn't have that, and then they did.
All right, folks. So once again, Larry is doing the iterative improvements as he goes, and the design is still there. But like, talk us through now that I've totally messed up defining Gen 1.5. We're just gonna move past that,
you were
folks.
right on. I just meant that particular paddle is all.
All right. Well, I hear you guys. Larry's being nice. I was wrong. But tell us, like, why'd you want to do a starter paddle? And Was I right? Did you see the space in the market?
You're right on. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like every pedal is to like fit that level that you're at as you go. So if you're just starting, but you know you're going to be into it, that's where the citrus is. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm a little bit better now, but you know, I need a
Spoiler
little more
alert,
heat.
folks. Spoiler alert. He jumped to the citrus, but put a pin
Oh,
in
I'm
that
sorry.
one.
I didn't know we were going through the whole lineup. That's
I
okay.
told you that, Larry. That's the
Okay.
whole thing.
I
All
thought
right,
like,
folks.
okay, we have
All
a lot
right,
of
folks.
paddles.
If you join Matthew K. Pickleball podcast, and Wilson's not here to keep me calm, just know you will be screamed at if you do something that I don't like. So, oh man, I try to keep this family friendly, but folks, I was being a butt right there, a butt. Yeah, trying to think of an appropriate word to describe. Larry, I shouldn't scream at you, but yeah, we're about
It's
through
your
the line.
podcast. Yeah, you
Well,
yell at whoever you want.
I don't want to yell at anyone other than Wilson. But okay, so you wanted to create not the very first starter paddle, but like I want to take this more seriously than just casual weekend play. And so I thought that was really smart. I think you released it at a great time. And then before we jump to the citrus, because I do want to talk about that, I did want to. So this is a paddle I actually haven't gotten to spend a lot of time with, but I know you're a fan of this one because you freaking made it. Now,
yeah, it's okay.
this is the Juiced,
No, I
and
like it a
this is a Gen 1.5. But how are you defining Gen 1.5 with this one?
So Gen 1.5 is just having that addition to foam in it. So like calling it a Gen 1 too is also like such a, I don't want a Gen 1.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure to have that 1.5 at the very least. So we added foam in the handles with them.
Foam in the handle.
That one uniquely is the 3K Kevlar. So carbon fiber and Kevlar weave.
Yes. And the other big thing this is a 13 millimeter paddle. The other thing that's unique
Super
about
thin.
this, it's super thin. The other thing though is it's using 6 millimeter cells in its polypropylene honeycomb. And so this is power oriented with a denser I would describe it as when the ball hits it, it's got a denser feel, and that's just the nature of like 6 millimeter cells, less air, more plastic. The ball contact is a bit different. And so once again, this is for a very specific kind of style, for a specific kind of player that wants how this feels. But then you didn't so you experimented with that, but then you continued the experimentation and sort of potentially, I would say the folks that maybe want what the Juice offers, but with a very different ball feel, they've got the Circuit, which was your KiwiLabs take on Gen 3, which I define as a thermoform paddle that has additional foam enhancements. But what's unique, and I do have a review of this one on the channel, folks, because I really love this paddle, and I've hit quite a bit with this one. What's unique about KiwiLabs' take on Gen 3, and if you dig into Larry's YouTube, you'll see that he was a little hesitant diving into Gen 3 or going all in because there's a lot of issues with foam paddles. This was the time of the ripple and just different things going on. Were foam enhanced paddles going to be USAP legal? And ultimately, I would say, based off of me tracking Larry's journey on his channel, he pumped the brakes, and I would say he was a little cautious. And then I think what resulted was a paddle that, compared to the Gen 3 paddles we're seeing now, was utilizing foam in a conservative way. So it's not packed with foam. It's got targeted foam. And I think it is one of the best Gen 3 paddles to start with. And so I would say it's just, I really like this one. And going back to our conversation about thicknesses, once you start messing around it's hard to use those rule of thumbs, and I actually prefer the 14 millimeter, and I think it's more controllable than the 16 millimeter, which is counterintuitive to some of the rules of thumb of pickleball past. But yeah, I love this paddle. And was I right? Did I? Were you hesitant?
Zero notes. Perfect.
Cool. What's your daily driver? I know you're always testing. Yeah. All right. That's what I thought. Okay.
Well, this guy. Where do you have lead on it?
Nope. No lead for me.
Okay.
Just some tape.
I put 3 gram pucks in like the top quarters of them, and it's perfect.
Yeah, I think if people were to adjust it, there's no need. I try to only, because I go through so many paddles, I typically only try to adjust paddles to dampen pop on flat hits at the kitchen. And so typically if I'm adding weight, it's only down at the throat. Okay. And sometimes I'll sacrifice deep drives just because if I was to try to, it's not a huge part of. Well, this one, you get plenty of drive out of the box, in my opinion, for especially my style play, which doesn't lean heavily on hanging out at the baseline. And so, lovely paddle. And folks, I did a giveaway for this one, and it was to try to get folks to choose between 14 and 16. And really, I know from Larry's YouTube channel, that 16 millimeter was because folks were asking for it. He actually play tested the 14 millimeter, and I really think it's the standout. And so if you're looking at Kiwi's line and want to try like a really easy to use Gen 3, I would go 14 millimeter all day. Lovely, lovely paddle. And now that brings me to the one that I actually don't have, which maybe you can send it to me sometime. But the Citrus.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know you didn't have it. That's on me.
Look at that, guys. I'm always trying to get the review units. But I wanted to talk about that paddle. So we just talked about a good beginner paddle, a good, like, I'm more than a weekend warrior. I am trying to have fun and play well. But, and this is going to be our lead into one of my big topics of this 3-hour pod, which is you then created a paddle called the Citrus, also targeted at, I would say, that market, maybe even the weekend warrior, someone that's not being super serious, but that's such like a competitive space to be with all the Amazon paddles. But you created a paddle called the Citrus. After promo code Matthew K, it's about $55. It's a Gen 1 build, I believe, with a carbon fiber face. But you opted to not get USAP approval. And so talk us through that. I want to know in this bit of the conversation, like, what's it like working with USAP? Is it a good thing? I'll make sure you answer these parts of it. So if you're swirling already, but what are the challenges? What are the costs specific for a small paddle company working with USAP? And I think that you could tie into like, why is the Citrus not USAP approved? Why is it not approved? And then what's it like working with USAP?
Sure. So
as a small paddle company,
they actually don't match up like you think they would, which is hopefully a good thing. So like when we came out with the Citrus, it was before there was actually any price hikes or we'll say craziness with the USAP. It was just like this is targeted for someone who's like literally just starting, or they know they're going to be playing a lot, so they want something like, with a black face. Everyone else has black carbon faces. So, I want to make sure it has that. But I definitely don't care. Like, I'm not going to do a tournament tomorrow. Like, so we did like the buyer persona or whatever. I did. And it just came down to like, well, I don't think this person cares about it being approved. They just want a really good paddle that's going to help them learn pickleball so that they can get to that next step where they want like a 0-0 start or something else. So, that's what that decision was. And then working with the USAP is, getting
let me put a
harder
pin.
every
Let
day.
me put a pin.
I'll
Let
stop
me
it
put
there.
yeah for because the citrus specifically that's super interesting. But I'm just curious, like, so if the target audience is the newbie, the person that's walking to open play for the first time, how do they learn about KiwiLabs? Like, did you ever consider, is that distributed on Amazon? Were you looking to do a big box retail push on that one? Because that audience, like KiwiLabs, the smaller paddle companies are for folks like they find them typically because they're hunting for the best deal or the latest and the greatest, right? So how does the new player find that paddle specifically? What's the thought
Great
on that?
question. There was just a specific marketing campaign for that, and just
Okay.
like via Facebook ads and stuff like that. I will say also, like in our local community here, I'm like super lucky. I live in Grand Rapids and a little bit north of Grand Rapids, Michigan here, and we've gained a lot of popularity and people just starting here, coming to the shop. Like I'd say I sell 10x more citruses like in my retail store than I do online. And that's
Right.
really where it's getting the most action of like, okay, our friends told us about you guys. We really want to start playing pickleball. I need a place to start. We have something to get them in the door that isn't, over a hundred
Right.
dollars like any other paddle. So it
Okay.
fills
Yeah.
in that spot.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I would just say, folks, if you're starting a paddle company, that particular segment of the market is I would say, very difficult
Yeah.
to compete in. And so Larry's at an advantage because he had a community already invested in Kiwi Labs and he had a storefront in some respect that, like, yeah, that makes complete sense. Like the citrus is a paddle you reach for, you go to the cash register.
And that said, I personally still play with that paddle. That being not only like because we use a lower grade carbon fiber too that I'm very transparent about, and I think it plays so good. But like you were just saying, like you want to release something that's the latest and greatest. No one wants T300 carbon fiber, even though I personally think it plays amazing. How do you go and market that? I haven't figured that out yet, or I would release it. But
Well,
um,
I don't think a lot of companies know what carbon fiber they are getting. But
that's
yeah,
yeah,
when I hit with it, Larry, I'll tell you what I think.
sure.
But let's talk about USA. That was a little dig, folks. I scream at Larry and then I
He's
tell him
gonna get
where
a free
that.
paddle out of it, and
Yeah, where the
I don't know
heck
if
is
we
my
should be
review
rewarding
then?
this.
But now, like, yeah, I want to. Larry, you were very vocal during USAP, sort of having some preferential treatment with the bigger companies
Mhm.
compared to the smaller companies. Basically, folks, I'm sure if you're into our 63-minute mark of this podcast, you're very aware. But last year, USAP sort of they got the screws returned on them. They turned the screws on other folks, but basically, there's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of changes happening, and a lot of confusion. And basically, USAP is a governing body that basically says if your paddle is okay for a slew of tournaments. And it's really, for the longest time, was the only sort of kind of ceiling of power, ceiling of like what a paddle could do for even rec play because tournament folks still go to open play. That's where they're playing. And I think there needs to be some sort of parameters, even for open play, for what a paddle can do just to keep things fun because for things to be fun, things need to be fair. And so USAP was the entity that kept things fair and ultimately, in my eyes, kept things fun, even if you're not doing the tournament stuff. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about what USAP does. But last year they were changing things up as a result of different things. Um, yeah, what do you think, Larry? I think USAP is a good thing. I think we need things to be fair so things can be fun. What's your take? You're the one though the screws get turned on as a paddle company owner. So what do you think about USAP?
Yeah. Before I overly critique them or anything, I do think they're good. I think they are what the sport needs. I'm so glad they exist. I think they're simply just trying to keep up with, like, they literally, who could have guessed that we would have like 10x not only just the amount of paddles being released, but the amount of brands out there. Like, there's so many pickleball paddle companies. The sport's just growing so fast. It's just like it hit that hockey stick growth, and I personally just don't know if they were ready for that to happen. So that is where the root of all these issues are happening, and right now it's kind of just radio silence from them. They came out with new testing. Paddles are now, I don't know if you're caught up, taking 3 to 10 times longer to get back from testing. Like, there's so much that I think they're trying to figure out right now that at least they're being quiet, and hopefully when they come back, they're going to have like a very, very straight up path forward for us manufacturers. Because right now it is very, it's a black hole almost.
So yeah, the challenges and costs of a specific to a small paddle company, obviously USAP dramatically raised the costs of getting paddles tested, and that's
but
how you get
worry,
paddles.
It takes twice as long to get your paddles approved.
Right. So they raised the price,
Yeah.
and then they extended the time that it took. And then one of the frustrations I know KiwiLabs had was there isn't a lot of communication from USAP to, and I always find it interesting how you call yourself a manufacturer. I think that is, I think that's a humble label, because you're doing much more than just facilitating the manufacturing of paddles, but you have labeled yourself that before in some of your content. But anyway, USAP wasn't communicative with your company, the size of your company, where other companies, bigger players, got access.
I'm still waiting for a reply on an email about that exact issue.
So basically, one of the challenges is if you don't have enough money in the game, it seems you're out of the loop on certain things, and that makes planning that, like, going back to, I mean, ultimately, I think it worked in your advantage because you were conservative with your approach to Gen 3 foam, but I'm sure that created a lot of anxiety, not knowing, and then knowing that other entities had more knowledge that you weren't privy to. Basically, there's a big meeting with some lowering pulse information that KiwiLabs Larry didn't get to be in the room on, and so I think USAP. I'm sure you listen to the Matthew K. Pickleball podcast. Like, let's figure out a way where you can just like have a blast post on your website where updates that you share with everyone, and let the gatekeeping, like, you're trying to help players and keep the companies in check, but let's keep that a level playing field, because ultimately if a KiwiLabs can't get the same amount of information, they can't compete as well, and ultimately these are the companies that are keeping paddle prices affordable. And so I think USAP, we love what you're doing with keeping the sport fair and fun, but let's also keep the competition fair. And so figure out a way to communicate everything to everybody is my take. I sort of stole the segment, Larry, on that. But
and just to maybe help clarify, the specific instance that we're talking about was like their latest media day, where they unveiled a lot of their new testing and, you know, getting the word out about how their new PB Core testing is working and everything. And we did have a meeting that everyone was invited to prior, but if you were a video attendee, you couldn't see any of the equipment. So the very first unveiling of a lot of this equipment that they're using was to like 10 people that they invited. They didn't invite every single brand, or there wasn't a live stream to see it. So our first view of how our entire livelihoods are being tested, like, was the same as the general public, which that was my issue. And then I, asked what's going on here, and I'm still waiting for an answer. So We just
All
aren't
right.
loud enough.
All right, USAP. Come on, shoot Larry an email reply. Like he's definitely he's going to bed at night still thinking about that.
A
So
little bit, a little bit.
and then I did want to just highlight and then highlight also USAP did raise the cost of getting a paddle approved, and obviously that is a bigger ask for companies that have fewer financial resources, which will be the startup companies and the smaller companies. And that is relevant to the next little bit of our conversation, which is probably why you clicked on this video. It's time to talk tariffs. And basically, I wanted to just situate this conversation like this is real talk about tariffs. We've had lots of people pontificate and just like talk about like what it could do, but folks, you're looking at a real human being. Larry, this is a person. Little Larry, and he's running a business making paddles for pickleball players like us. And once again, I just try to hammer in this point regarding USAP, which is USAP raised the costs of getting paddles approved. Approving paddles is how you keep pickleball fair. Keeping pickleball fair makes it fun. Raising the costs will impact smaller companies, will prevent new companies without the capital of coming onto the scene. And ultimately, that competition is what keeps our paddles from all being $333. All right? That's my take. That's the Matthew K. Pickleball hot take. And tariffs, to me, it's pretty simple. If the cost of something goes up, the maker of that good or the seller of that good, let's say a pickleball company, PickleballPaddle company, the seller of that good either eats that cost or has to pass it down to the consumer. And for budget pickleball companies, the margins are slimmer than companies that can charge $333 for a paddle, for example. So it's really not possible, in my opinion, for smaller companies to actually practically be able to eat that cost. So smaller pickleball companies, paddle prices, potentially those prices will have to go up if the costs of getting those paddles to market goes up. That's pretty simple to me. I think people are kind of overcomplicating how tariffs function. And so, yeah, if you want to debate that down in the comments, please, it will help the algorithm. Let's get that chatter going.
Everyone start fighting. Yeah, go.
But please be civil. If you are super rude, I do delete comments. So be civil. I know there's one commenter occasionally that chimes into the video, so please chime in now. But folks, if you really want to get even more into the head of a paddle company owner, in fact, it's Larry's head. He's actually released a video on his own channel that walks you through this. And we're gonna. I just thought you could maybe highlight a little bit about that for you. What is it like as a small paddle company owner to what's the impact of what's happening regarding tariffs? Yeah, I think I could break it down into sections for you and highlight my big two questions, or let you spitball like a junior high schooler. Like, what are you want to? Meaning, folks, like spitballing, like junior high school,
like shooting an actual spitball.
Yeah, spitball. Okay. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
You said it as clear as day. That's exactly what's going to happen. Unfortunately, the costs are just going up, and there's two ways that it can show down, right? So, first of all, I got to say how lucky I am, because let me explain like worst case scenario. There's some like, think of like a new brand who just kind of like blew up a little bit. They went from ordering, a couple hundred paddles to a couple thousand paddles. And if they are, and they probably do, they already have thousands of paddles being made that are still overseas. And the cost that they've estimated for the next year probably depend on that order that they have being made right now. And then they're told, that cost might double or triple, and they can't even get the product back before they have to pay that. So some people are being like, I just want to say that to say like I have um, a different problem where I'm solving a new way to start producing again, where some people are stuck in the middle. So, uh, and I just don't want to sound like I have it the worst because there's some brands that might disappear because of this, like straight up can't afford it. Like, here's a super important example, I think, of like people who get purchase orders, right? So, like, let's say Walmart likes my paddle and they say, okay, I would love to start selling your paddle. And I'm like, awesome, that's great. I take a loan out because I'd have to be able to meet the supply that they're about to order. So I take a loan out and I have my factory overseas making thousands and thousands of paddles because I'm going to, sell them to Walmart. And now for me to get them back is going to cost more than what I was going to have to sell them to Walmart. So all of a sudden you're out that loan, you might be out product and you can't fulfill that order. So like there are brands that are like sincerely in a very big pickle because of that. Where me right now, I just need to figure out a path going for the future. And the worst thing that's going to happen to me right now is the slice is literally sold out right now. So that sucks. But that's the biggest problem I have.
Wow. Well, folks, if you want more information on this, I'm going to dig into this a little more with Larry, but there's also a great podcast called Plain English. They just had a conversation with a toy manufacturer and they really go into policy suggestions. We're not that wonky on the Matthew K. Pickleball podcast, but yeah, check out Plain English. They did a podcast with, I think, some really sensible policy suggestions. But I think based off of what I already know about Larry, because he's talked about this before, so I think what you really highlighted is really important, which is, and all of my business acumen is gleaned from Shark Tank. So please, everyone, I am an expert. But I think what you highlighted is really important to highlight, which is there are human beings that lived in a certain system that made decisions, potentially taking big loans to fulfill obligations, take advantage of opportunities, live the American dream. And ultimately, what's happened is there have been some changes made, but with no runway. They just happened overnight. And so there are things being lost in the weeds. And so Larry's fortunate. I guess, Larry, that Walmart order didn't come through. I hope it does. Yeah. I hope you have that problem to figure out. But
Larry's so unsuccessful that who cares?
Right. Well, no, I did not say that.
I know, I'm just playing.
But I think one thing that you did highlight. So the idea of this tariffs is to ultimately try to onshore some certain kinds of manufacturing, and you do a really good job in your YouTube video to highlight that. First off, that would be a long-term venture because, folks, you are all now experts on thermoform paddles. They require a certain kind of expertise and a certain kind of manufacturing equipment. All of that, first off, the manufacturing equipment, my understanding, is produced overseas. And to onshore production of, let's say, to onshore production of my beloved slice, this is a thermoform paddle. To onshore it would require having those presses in the States. And to realize that, you would have to get that equipment. And that has been tariffed as well, is my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it'd only be a one-time purchase, but it's still, I don't know. I think it's kind of funny. It's like that's the whole point of this is to, stop buying from China. You got to make one last purchase from China. I'm sure you could find some of it U.S., but like most of those materials, you'd still end up, in my opinion, buying from China or out of the country.
Right. And
anyway.
yeah, and you talk about this in your video. So say you wanted to onshore, you've eaten that cost. You weren't super incentivized to purchase that equipment beyond if you wanted to keep producing this paddle, right? So say you somehow have the capital as a small KiwiLabs, maybe the e-bikes are really selling and you're able to get the equipment here. You then have to train,
Train.
get that expertise. I don't know where you would find that expertise since the equipment would be imported. But all of that would take time. So as a small company, you don't have a warehouse full of slices. You're out of slices. Folks, you might see one listed for $400 on eBay though after this
One of the last
podcast.
ones for the time being.
But yeah, so I think that's a pickle. That it's hard to slice. But but like, is that right? Like, is that what you're living with? Like, you like the onshoring would be difficult. You do talk about a solution, but it's still a timely one. I don't know. Did you want to update folks? Like, I guess really what I want to know is, Larry, real talk. What are you doing?
What
Like,
am I going to do?
the tariffs, we don't have clarity. Like, what's KiwiLabs? Are we gonna see a slice? Are you shutting down? Like, how are you as a person that is running a business having to make choices? Like, what are you doing? What's your thinking?
Yeah. Well, I still don't have a very, a lot's up in the air, but I have some very cool opportunities with this. So, one is trying to do something here, and I have very real plans of making that happen. I'm in talks with some people who might be able to, we're going to make this work, which is really cool. The problem with that, though, is it just wouldn't make sense to be able to reproduce the exact same paddles we are already making. It seems like a near impossible task to replicate the exact paddle with the exact performance, taking, it only, like that just seems so hard. It would take forever. However, for our new generations, for innovating on new technologies, there's tons of opportunity to do that here. So for our future lineup, if we take this on head on and start to produce here, there's a lot of opportunity in that. So that's half of it. That's the dream. That'd be so cool. But that's, so far from guaranteed. So what we're going to do in the meantime is do smaller batch orders. We're just going to stockpile and kind of like wait it out by making smaller orders. That's like literally all we can do. We're working with our factories to split some of the costs, so they're going to come down a little bit on paddles. So it's not as big of an issue. It still sucks. We're going to have to, eat into our margins a bit, but we're just going to slow play it. Really, that's all that that's my strategy. I still don't want to commit to anything drastic, but I know we can tiptoe around this for the time being and just still cross our fingers that, these people who are making the rules wake up a little bit and, stop this.
Okay. So you're taking things slow. You're doing meditation, just coping with anxiety. And it does sound like, it's heartening to hear. It sounds like some of the cost burden is being shared with your overseas partner.
Yes, so far. We'll see.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And
They're
then
going to
as
help
far
us a
as
little. Yeah.
okay, interesting. And then
That's not for everyone. I've just, we've been working with these guys for a long time, so we do have a good relationship with them. And I think we found a couple good solutions to make it not as bad. It still sucks. It's not like we have a full-on answer to this, but we have a way to survive.
An interim to keep KiwiLabs alive. Because really, in your video, so you're going to keep the brand alive. You're going to keep KiwiLabs alive. And yeah, your video, I was worried because not everyone's in your position where you have established relationships and it's scary times. I'm empathetic. Like, I get anxiety thinking about it. But I'm heartened to hear.
You're right on though, and that's like the biggest story here is like not me. I'm okay. I got lucky, like we said. But I'm so worried about some of these other brands. There's so many people who might get like literally like if this was like a couple of years ago, for instance, like when like it was like right when we got like what I'd say popular versus where we were anyways. So like we're not popular, but we've been less popular. And I had to make my like biggest purchase ever, and it was draining our entire bank account to get inventory to prepare for summer. And if that were to happen and all my product were stuck there or something, or because on my orders I pay like 30% upfront and the full once they're produced, like even that 30%, like well, I would have been so cooked. So yeah, it scares me, man. I'm worried because I don't know. I like that there's a lot of people out there in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, you know?
I mean, ultimately, I think the amount of companies benefits the consumer because ultimately, if it's only the giant pickleball paddle companies left, I'm not saying they will collude on price, but there would be no incentive to keep prices low. And I think what we've learned with the boom in pickleball, that growth in interest is what has brought new companies to the table, and that's ultimately how we've arrived at the new tech. Like, I think if this boom didn't happen, if there weren't new companies pushing into the space, like we would maybe have Gen 2 paddles or thermoform paddles. I don't think we would be where we are today. And I think luckily this didn't happen last year, where hot press paddles, like that was a requirement, because now the innovation, yeah, there is room where you potentially don't need the same factory infrastructure. And guys, Larry has other big ideas that he's talked about in his own video. In fact, I'll try to link it here, about maybe teaming up with some other smaller brands. But I won't go into that here because I want Larry to say whatever he wanted to say. And I think one thing that I wanted to highlight, the pros and cons of sort of being a small company versus one of the big ones. Like, as a small company, we've talked about how Larry's gotten to experiment. And also we've talked about how he's been able to quickly respond to like market demand. He did that seeing there is a hole in his own community for a great starter paddle. He saw that with the other sort of intermediate paddle, and just like being able to move quickly. And I think, I think practicing that muscle has armed you in a way that probably other folks aren't. And then one thing that we've talked about with Kiwi is that we talked about how you're creating paddles specific to every kind of player, every kind of style. I wouldn't call them niche paddles, but very like player focused paddles. And so if you wanted to lump this in, like, I want to give you a chance to talk all you want about tariffs and use this as therapy to get through. I'm not a professional, but if you have anything you want to air out, but no, trust me. But anything else you want to say regarding the tariffs? That's why people clicked. I think you have a much more hopeful message than I expected. And so I'm heartened to hear that. I think after having talked with you so long, though, I think you are a glass half full person. You're someone that leaves the sunblock in the car. Like, you're fearless. And so I think you're gonna get through this, Larry, and you got folks rooting for you, especially me, because I love what you're doing. And yeah, if your line has to excise some of what's gotten you to where you are, you're in a great place with where the technology is going. And now that you have a lot of experience under your belt dealing with the craziness from USAP, dealing with the craziness of global economics, what's next for KiwiLabs? You said you're not quitting, you're not shutting down. What are you working on? Anything you can share? And then, yeah, once again, if there are folks, maybe before you talk about what's on the horizon, like maybe there's a paddle company owner right now that did do that 100 batch order and or I don't know, like maybe there's someone struggling right now that doesn't have the cachet with the having an established relationship. Any motivational words for someone in the thick of it? Because I know you've gone through some tough times, I'm sure. What do you say to the person that clicked on this podcast and was like, Larry's going to solve all of global trade for me? What do you say to them?
I say, do what I'm doing. Wait it out in any way you can. Don't give up. You know, I might have leaned into that in my thumbnail or whatever on the video, but I'm obviously, you know, that's the whole game on YouTube. You got to do that stupid stuff. But at the end of the day, I kind of always knew that, like, still know, and this would be my advice, is just if you wait long enough, things change. So you can survive. Like, I know my runway of like where things are now. It's not going to be awesome, but I can go until here, so why quit here, you know? And hopefully by here it changes. So that's my optimism's take for everyone, is wait it out as long as you can. You can't, you know? Is that
all
advice?
Right? No, that's definitely advice. All right,
yeah, sure,
Larry.
okay.
All right, folks. You heard it here. Larry said, and Matthew's paraphrasing, but the only sure thing, the only constant in life is you can expect change. So if you're going through a tough time, if you're a paddle company owner,
put, actually,
if you're a paddle company owner and the screws are being turned on you, just know something is going to change. It might get worse, but it could change.
It definitely could get worse too.
Yeah, but it's going to change again, and so ultimately,
it could get worse again too. So
yeah, but it's all the only constant though, folks, is change is inevitable, and so hang in there. And yeah, it's cool. All right, Larry, I know I've had you on the pod way longer than you probably ever desired, and so before we wrap
it's
up,
been a blast.
Before we wrap up for real, I want you to give folks, beyond the optimistic pep talk, what's next for KiwiLabs? You're not shutting down. In fact, you're working on new stuff. Can you give us a little bit of a tease of what you're working on?
Yeah, I'll just kind of sum it up this way: is like, with that, and you know, kind of touch on everything else we talked about. I just try to make paddles that fill in the gap of what I think is missing or what I want to see out there. And that's what we're doing next, is just, you know, what do I want next to the paddle? So we're working on it. I've got about 4 options that are like really good, and they all involve foam. We'll just say that. So I'll leave a little to the imagination, maybe force a couple people to come watch my latest videos. We play test just a couple of this stuff, and I'm making more. So definitely also go check out KiwiLabs TV to check out that adventure. I'm in an edited video. I'm, believe it or not, just as annoying to hear talk. So you'll love the channel if you like this.
Guys, it is. I have the notification bell for a KiwiLabs channel clicked. I really do.
I love to hear it.
I do. So yeah, if you're a paddle nerd, if you're a gearhead, definitely check out KiwiLabs YouTube channel. It's pretty much the only place you can get a real raw look at what it is to try to make it as a paddle company. And check out their line. They've got some great paddles. And I would go quickly because I think who knows what will go out of stock. Don't forget to use promo code Matthew K. Works on all their stuff. And yeah, Larry, thank you so much for joining. If there's anything else you want to say, I'm here for it. Otherwise, I think we'll let the folks go. Please check out Larry's channel, KiwiLabs channel, and please like and subscribe to this video. Oh, but wait, folks. There's more. We are doing a giveaway. Larry has so kindly, this is the first giveaway we've done on the podcast, and we are going to give away, or Larry is going to give away, a 0-0 start paddle. And all you need to do is comment down below, what's your favorite citrus fruit? All right, and they don't all have to be kiwis. Let's Be honest. This is a very intense survey. We need the truth. And then I'll also have a Google form down there where you need to add your contact info. Otherwise, I won't be able to facilitate getting the paddle to you. In fact, if you're a podcast listener, one of my other giveaways, I'm still waiting to hear back from someone. So check out that top 10 paddles video, because we might have to run that one again because someone did not get back to me, and I've been waiting a while. So check out that video. But so yeah, like and subscribe, and comment your favorite citrus fruit, and then fill out the Google form. And I'll have this all down in the video description. And then also, please follow Larry's channel. He's got some great stuff going. And
thank you.
That's all I've got. Larry, any final words as we wrap up this session?
I don't think so. It's just, I don't know. I'm happy we did this. I don't usually get to ramble about this stuff, I almost said live, but obviously we're not live. But well, it feels fun to just talk about paddle. So
yeah,
whenever you need someone to be your other co-host, it seems like I can fill in there for you.
All right, Wilson, you better be nice to me. Larry's gunning for the seat. But all right, well, folks, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and we're also on all the other podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify. Follow us there, write a review, that all really helps. But more than anything, I hope you get to pickle soon. Larry hopes, I'm almost certain, that you get to pickle soon. But just don't forget, it's about having fun.